again, a lot of it has just been doing this for 20 years, and I just know the psyche of the individual and like when to approach them correctly. And it's not going to be an approachable conversation when, it's just trying to get to that finish line. Afterwards, people start to think through actually, okay, how do I operate this property? What we've seen in the insurance space is that there's only a few things that people care about through that 60, 90 days, well, normal time frame, is the price going to match what I used in my calculator or what I estimated and not going to screw up my proceeds? And is the coverage going to meet the bank requirements, right? And there's not a whole lot of listening to me or my team or really in general. And I don't blame it as far as like, here's what your deductibles are. Here's what your coverages are. It's like, hey, Matt, what is my per door cost? And is the lender going to sign off? So instead of kind of fighting that, we've put a lot of things in place to kind of just get people out of their own way as it relates to insurance. So we make sure that we try to hit what you need for closing. We work with the lender, which really is a fail safe as far as coverage is. They're going to make sure that you have it. And then we do an after the close call. Once you've had your celebration, you've closed, you did your Facebook posts, all that stuff, right? Then we meet with you and actually talk about like, hey, here's what your deductibles are, here's what your coverages are. Because the nice thing is we can make changes after the close, up or down or anything like that, and you can actually make more business decisions at that point. You're really constrained within the closing time frame of what the lender's going to accept and how much money you can pay at closing, right? After closing, you can start to make a little bit more business decisions as far as, oh, maybe I want to, as a general business expense, do a deductible buy down, or, maybe I do need a little bit coverage here, or I just want to adjust this. The other thing we do a lot is put in like renters legal liability type programs that help offset some costs, offset your deductible costs, add some revenue, right? Which is something unique. A lot of people think insurance is just a cost, but you actually can use insurance in some cases to actually add revenue to your space. So we do a lot to just understand what the person who's syndicating or whatever you want to call it's going through, and then getting things done so that we comply with what they want at the time. But then we make sure we go back and kind of relook at it with everybody, because we understand that, as you mentioned, things will get missed, especially when you got a million other things to do. And your mindset is like, just get the insurance done, Matt, or just get it over the finish line for me. So to kind of answer your question, that's what we do. We kind of make sure that we understand. And most of us have either done real estate ourselves, or maybe we're active investors, at my company. So we get it a little bit more than the typical broker, because we're realizing some of that stuff ourselves.
So, but why not take care of that before closing? Like, why not? Why? So, what is the issue? Explain the issue between what the lender's looking for, and to try to get the deal done and closed, and just getting it done at closing versus just getting it done and then adjusting it later. Like, why does that not work as well when you try to get everything done up front at closing, so you don't have to worry about it later?
Yeah, because I'll use examples. So a lender a lot of times will allow a $25,000 what we call AOP, or all other perils deductible, and up to 5% on, like, let's say wind and hail or named storm. Now, so that will actually meet the requirements, right? And going up to it is going to give you your lowest premium. So going into closing, that seems good. Lender is required, hits requirement. It's going to keep me from being at 700 door down to 600 door. But what I'm not thinking about at the time, right, is I have a claim, and then I got to pay out this deductible, right? And so in a perfect world, everyone would sit down with us through this procedure, and they would say, hey, forget what my cost is to the deal, but just get me the best coverage, get me the lowest deductibles you can. But what we know really happens is, they're coming up with an estimate for that insurance sometime in the process with their loan. And whatever that number is, anytime you go over it, it's going to affect your proceeds. It's going to just affect the deal in general. So it is that balance of it. And if I called most syndicators, they probably wouldn't say this out loud, but if I called most syndicators and said, hey, we're at 700 a door, you estimated $700, but really, I think we should go from 5% down to 2% of your deductible. I think we should make this or whatever, but it's going to go to 800. You know what they're going to tell me? No, no, no. Let's just keep it at that 700 door. So again, a lot of it has just been doing this for 20 years, and I just know the psyche of the individual and like when to approach them correctly. And it's not going to be an approachable conversation when, it's just trying to get to that finish line. Afterwards, people start to think through actually, okay, how do I operate this property? And they're more open to ideas on getting maybe the correct coverages compared to just what gets it over the finish
Yeah,
line.
and this is, I think, a typical mindset. And we,
Mhm.
like I said, we used to have it. We spend a lot more on insurance, on time on insurance now than we ever did before. But I think what you're saying is, why fight someone's mindset when they just want to basically, they're treating it as a commodity, right? If you want to compete as an insurance provider, then you're basically selling yourself almost like a commodity, knowing that there's going to be gaps and holes, but there's no willingness to talk about it maybe up front because they're very busy trying to get the closing across. On the other hand, though, a more experienced syndicator probably will try to make sure the coverages are correct and care a lot more about the details of that coverage. Has that been your experience as well?
Yeah, it really, it's never holes. It's more just what I call business decisions, right? Like, we're never writing anybody that doesn't have enough coverage, or it really just comes down to a lot of times it's deductibles is the biggest key. So not really a hole. It's more just what people are not doing the math on is just, how much that deductible is going to cost if you had a claim. So the lender's never going to allow you to have holes in your coverage, right? We got to get everything inspected and go through them. They're running their replacement costs. We're running ours. So, that would never be something that we would do, inexperienced or experienced, syndicator. It's more just the little things like the, deductibles or amount of umbrella, things like that you might want to adjust after. And really a lot of it too is additional programs, that will help offset some of those deductibles or add revenue. And that's really the focus. I don't want to get people off on the wrong foot that like, oh, potentially, there's holes in the coverage, right? I think it's more just, an adjustment. And there's just a lot of constraints as it relates to the premium that we can, put on the books for a close.
So what is your process then for working with a syndicator, whether you do it before closing or after closing? And holds is probably a strong word, but you're right, it's business decisions. Hey, were you
Yeah.
aware that it's going to cost you this much if this were to happen? How do you feel about that? Like, how do you engage with the syndicator either before or after closing to make sure that the policy actually is what the partners want?
Yeah, so we provide it up front, of course, like, it's a conversation that we're having, we provide the certificates, we provide all the coverages, and then we have a full program that we do after the close. So we get on the phone call, we make sure, we know property management, we know who they want to call for inspection, who they want to talk about if something happened, with the insurance, who's going to be turning in claims. We talk about the coverages that they currently have. We talk about the deductible. So we have a program in place up front before the call. A lot of it is, just providing them the details, going through it, letting them review what they have. A lot of the work is done as well with the lender and their consultant and going through those coverages as well. So, it's kind of the mindset too, is that a lot of it is directed nowadays through, if you have an Arbor or Bancorp deal or something like that, a lot of the insurance, we're speaking more with the bank than we are even the client sometimes. And that's just part of the process because, the bank has one of the largest stakes, right? And they're going to do a lot for the syndication. So it's really a great thing. Syndicators should feel really good that they kind of have two parties looking at the insurance before closing. They have their insurance broker who's going to do the best job. Then they also have the lender and their consultant who is looking over everything and giving their recommendations. So it is overall, it's a really good process with everything that's in place.
You mentioned one consideration is getting the cost right. And so what is your counsel to a syndicator? Now, as they're underwriting deals, obviously, they don't have a live deal, so they can't get a live quote. But what can they do working with an insurance broker to try to get that estimate as accurate as possible for their underwriting?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a good point. So we have a team that will help you when you're under contract, right? And I think what it is, more importantly, in this space, especially right now in this time, we're in a very bear market as it relates to insurance. And so most of the time when you're working with a broker and you call them up when you're going to look at a deal, they're going to throw out a per door number for you. Hey, it's going to be 600 a door because it's Dallas. And what we've really done, and this actually helps the number from like what I call LOI stage to under contract to closing stage, is if you can get with our team and we provide a low end and a high end, right? And not just say it's either going to be 400 or it's going to be 600. We actually do a phone call up front. We fully analyze the deal. And what we'll do is we'll talk you through why it would be the low end and why it would be the high end, and really guide that person who's syndicating when they start getting under contract. They go through, they got under their PSA, they're going to do due diligence. We'll say, hey, it will meet this low end if the seller ends up having no losses, and it ends up being copper wiring, and it ends up being, where there's a bunch of updates. It's going to hit this high end if all of a sudden you're in due diligence and there's been 17 fires and it's straight aluminum and this. So what we really are doing is showing the syndicator like, hey, both of these numbers probably need to work for you, but here's how you get here. And if you want to dive in deeper, if you can get us this more information, here's how we can fine tune it. And that's been really helpful to help have the syndicator help us get to a finer, faster number, and be more accurate, right? If they never provide any of those items, those numbers are going to be in that loose state, and we won't be able to really firm them up till later in the process. But the more of that they can find out themselves or get during due diligence or before hard money gets in place, really can help define it. And they know exactly what they're looking for. And if they want to get more details from the seller's broker to feel more comfortable, they can. So that's really what it is providing that roadmap so the syndicator can understand not just why we came to a number, but what is actually going to dictate where this goes after you go under contract.